The British East India Company's conquest of India is well documented. Less known is the role played by another European power, Russia. In the 19th century, the Russian Empire, stretching from Poland to the Pacific, turned its gaze south towards India. This period, known as the Great Game, was a time of espionage, intrigue, and the ever-present threat of war. The possibility of a Russian invasion of India, however remote, preoccupied British strategists for decades. This fear was not entirely unfounded. Russia had been steadily expanding its territory throughout the 19th century, often at the expense of declining empires like the Ottomans and the Persians. India, with its vast wealth and strategic importance, was a tempting prize. The Great Game was sparked by a convergence of factors. The decline of traditional powers in Central Asia created a vacuum that both Russia and Britain sought to fill. Russia, under Tsarist rule, was driven by a desire for warm water ports and an ambition to expand its influence. Britain, meanwhile, was determined to protect its most valuable colonial possession, India. This rivalry played out on multiple fronts. In Afghanistan, both powers vied for influence, leading to a series of Anglo-Afghan wars. In Persia, diplomatic missions and covert operations were the norm, as each side sought to outmaneuver the other. The Great Game was a complex web of intrigue and competition, with India at its heart. Russia's ambitions in India were multifaceted. Economically, India represented a potentially lucrative market for Russian goods. Politically, control over India would cement Russia's status as a global power. Ideologically, some within the Tsarist regime viewed Russia as having a civilizing mission in Asia, a mission that brought them into direct conflict with the British Empire. Throughout the 19th century, Russia launched a series of expeditions into Central Asia, gradually expanding its territory towards the borders of British India. These advances, coupled with diplomatic overtures to Indian rulers hostile to British rule, heightened British anxieties. The possibility of a Russian-backed uprising in India, however unlikely, was a constant fear. It is crucial to understand that India at this time was not a unified political entity, but rather a patchwork of princely states under British dominion. While the British East India Company exercised ultimate control, the response to the Russian threat was shaped by a complex interplay of British policies and the actions of local Indian rulers. Many Indian rulers, wary of Russian intentions and mindful of the potential consequences of a Russian invasion, chose to side with the British. They provided troops and resources to bolster British defences in the northwest frontier, recognizing that their own fate was intertwined with that of the British Raj. This cooperation was crucial in deterring a full-scale Russian invasion. Section 5. The Shadow of Invasion. While no full-scale Russian invasion of India ever materialized, the threat of invasion cast a long shadow over 19th-century British policy in India. The British built a network of fortifications along the northwest frontier, raised and equipped armies, and engaged in constant intelligence gathering to monitor Russian movements. This fear of invasion also shaped British policy in Afghanistan, which the British saw as a buffer state between India and Russia. The British fought 3 wars in Afghanistan during the 19th century, largely motivated by a desire to prevent Afghanistan from falling under Russian sway. Section 6. A Legacy of Mistrust. The Great Game, while often portrayed romantically, left a legacy of mistrust and instability in Central Asia that persisted long after the collapse of the Tsarist regime. The rivalry between the British and Russian empires fueled proxy wars, espionage, and diplomatic intrigue, undermining regional stability. The constant maneuvering and manipulation by the 2 European powers also had a profound impact on the internal development of the region. Indigenous states and societies were often caught in the crossfire, their interests subordinated to the geopolitical calculations of London and St. Petersburg. The seeds of future conflicts were sown during this era. Section 7. Shifting Alliances. Ironically, the Great Game eventually gave way to a different kind of strategic calculation. By the early 20th century, a newly unified Germany had emerged as a major threat to both Britain and Russia. This shared concern led to the Anglo-Russian Entente of 1907, which effectively ended the Great Game. The Entente, while primarily focused on containing German power, also had implications for Central Asia. It led to a formal agreement on spheres of influence in Persia, Afghanistan and Tibet, marking a departure from the earlier period of intense competition. The Great Game, driven by mutual suspicion and fear, had given way to a more pragmatic understanding of shared interests. As Section 8, the end of the Great Game. The First World War marked a definitive end to the Great Game. Britain and Russia, once rivals in Central Asia, found themselves allied against Germany. The war, however, had a profound impact on both empires, ultimately leading to their demise. The Russian Empire, racked by revolution, collapsed in 1917. The British Empire, though victorious, emerged from the war significantly weakened. India, a crucial source of manpower and resources during the war, witnessed a surge in nationalist sentiment. The era of European empires was drawing to a close, and with it the Great Game, a relic of a bygone age. Section 9, Echoes in the Modern Age. While the Great Game is often relegated to the history books, its echoes can still be felt in the modern age. The legacy of mistrust and rivalry between external powers continues to cast a shadow over Central Asia. The region remains geopolitically significant, a crossroads of energy resources, trade routes, and competing global interests. Understanding the dynamics of the Great Game is therefore essential for comprehending the complexities of Central Asia today. The historical echoes of this era of rivalry serve as a reminder of the enduring importance of diplomacy, cooperation, and a recognition of shared interests in a region of enduring geopolitical significance.